There are seasons in life where it feels like you are walking in circles, trapped in a loop that never ends. The faces may change, the details may look different, but the pain is the same. You meet the same kinds of people, repeat the same mistakes, and fall into the same traps, almost as if life itself has you caught in a pattern you cannot escape. No matter how hard you try to move forward, you feel yourself being pulled back into the same lessons. It's frustrating. It's exhausting. At times, it feels like punishment, like some invisible hand is holding you down. And then, without warning, something shifts. It doesn't come with fireworks or grand announcements. Sometimes it's as simple as waking up one morning and feeling lighter, even though nothing around you has changed. Or maybe you find yourself in a situation that used to crush you, but this time you notice you don't break. There's a calmness, a steadiness, as if the storm no longer lives inside you. It feels strange at first, almost unnatural, because you've carried the weight for so long that you forgot what it was like to be free of it. But according to Carl Jung, what you are feeling in that moment could be a profound spiritual signal: your karmic debt has been cleared. This isn't about cosmic punishment or some mystical scorecard where the universe seeks revenge. Karmic debt, as Jung understood it, is the unfinished business of the soul. It's the unresolved energy of your past, the shadows you refuse to face, the lessons you resisted. Until you confront them, they keep returning in different forms, pulling you back into the same suffering. This is why people repeat unhealthy relationships, self-sabotage their own opportunities, or carry guilt and shame for years. The cycle continues until the lesson is integrated. But here's the truth: karmic debt isn't forever. It's not a life sentence. The moment you truly learn what the pain was trying to teach you, the moment you face the shadow instead of running from it, the cycle breaks. And when that happens, the universe responds. You begin to feel unmistakable signs that you are finally free. The first thing you notice is emotional liberation. For years, old wounds shaped how you saw the world. Guilt whispered in your choices. Shame lingered in your silence. Resentment seeped into your relationships, coloring everything with suspicion or bitterness. You carried the past like a weight you couldn't put down. But then one day, without forcing it, without pretending, you realize it doesn't hold you anymore. The memory is still there, but it no longer stings. You can look back on it the way you look at a chapter in a book you've already read. It happened. It shaped you. But it no longer defines you. That heaviness turns into neutrality, and neutrality into peace. This shift isn't about pushing feelings away or convincing yourself that you're fine. It's something deeper, something real. Jung explained it as the unconscious releasing its grip. When we carry unresolved karma, the unconscious keeps projecting old pain onto the present. We mistake new people for old betrayals. We fear failure because of past wounds. We see ghosts where none exist. But when the debt is resolved, the projections stop. The shadows fade. Life feels clearer. You don't react with the same intensity anymore, because the emotional charge behind those triggers has dissolved. And this is where the freedom truly begins. You start noticing the small things: how calm you feel when someone tries to provoke you, how light you feel when recalling memories that once made you ache, how present you are in moments you used to sabotage. The inner storm begins to quiet. And in that silence, you realize you are not the same person you used to be. Something inside you has been released, and in its place, a deeper self has awakened. This is what happens when karmic debt is paid. The cycle ends, the weight lifts, and the soul breathes freely again. It is not the end of the journey but the beginning of a new one, a life no longer chained to the past, but open to what's ahead. There comes a time in every soul's journey when you notice that something inside you is shifted. It rarely announces itself with fireworks or sudden clarity. Instead, it creeps in quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night. One day, you remember a person who once wounded you deeply, and instead of anger rising in your chest or sadness catching in your throat, there is only calm. Not the hard shell of indifference, not the numbness of avoidance, but a genuine stillness, as if the wound has finally closed. You realize that the memory no longer has the power to twist your heart. It's just a story now, one you can look at without bleeding. Perhaps you notice it in other ways. The nightmares that once haunted you, the ones where you were running endlessly, falling without end, or screaming without voice, suddenly stop. They vanish like smoke from a fire that has burned itself out. The anxiety that used to hum in the background of your days, like an engine you couldn't shut off, begins to quiet. It doesn't vanish in a single breath, but little by little, you notice there is more space between the noise. You find yourself sitting in moments of silence that used to feel unbearable, only now they feel steady, even comforting. These changes rarely happen all at once. They weave themselves into your life so slowly that you don't always recognize them until you pause and look back. And when you do, you see clearly, where there was once chaos, now there is space. Where you were once chained to pain, now there is freedom. This is emotional liberation, though you may not have a name for it when it arrives. It isn't about pretending to be over it or forcing forgiveness where none exists. It is something deeper. It is the moment when your spirit no longer identifies with the wound. The pain is still part of your story, but it no longer defines the person you are becoming. Jung would say the unconscious has stopped projecting old shadows into your present. The ghosts of your past no longer appear in the faces of the people around you. You stop reacting with the same intensity because the charge is gone. And in this space, you discover that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering without suffering. As this inner freedom takes root, life itself begins to change in ways that feel almost enchanted. The flow returns. The right people show up in your path, not a moment too soon or too late. A stranger offers advice that echoes the very question you've been carrying in silence. A book seems to fall into your hands at the exact time you need it most. Problems that once felt like locked doors suddenly swing open without resistance. These aren't coincidences. They are synchronicities, the language of the universe, the signs that you are no longer fighting against the current but moving with it. When karmic weight is heavy, your energy is scattered. You force outcomes, chase validation, and stumble through resistance. But once the debt is cleared, the pieces fall together differently. The outer world mirrors the calm inside you. You begin to trust the timing of things. You see that what is meant for you doesn't need to be wrestled into existence, it arrives when you are ready to hold it. This doesn't mean you sit back and do nothing. You still act, but the action feels inspired, natural, and full of energy rather than desperate and draining. It is the difference between forcing a door open and having it unlock as you approach. Relationships shift, too. People enter your life with a kind of divine timing. A teacher, a partner, a friend, someone arrives with exactly the guidance, love, or support your soul was ready to receive. Old knots of conflict untangle themselves. Conversations you once dreaded now flow with surprising ease. Even struggles that used to trap you in circles begin to resolve themselves gracefully. You begin to understand what it feels like to live in alignment, where the inner and outer worlds reflect one another like twin mirrors. But perhaps the most profound shift of all comes when the old patterns stop repeating. The toxic relationships that once drained you no longer appear in your reality. The drama that seemed to follow you like a shadow dissolves. The destructive habits and choices that once seemed inescapable lose their grip. You wake up one day and realize the cycle is ended, the same kinds of people who once hurt you don't cross your path anymore. The same painful storylines no longer play out in your life. This isn't luck. It isn't chance. It's evidence that a karmic lesson has been fully lived and learned. The script has been rewritten, and the play has moved on. This breaking of cycles is liberation in its purest form. It is the soul's way of saying, you've understood what you came here to understand. The old lessons no longer need to be repeated. Where you once lived in storm after storm, you now walk under clearer skies. And the beauty of it all is that you can feel it. Deep down, you know. The tension has loosened. The heaviness has lifted. The story that once defined you has become a chapter instead of a prison. And in this recognition comes the quiet realization, the debt is done, the weight is lifted, and you are free to move forward without the chains of the past. There comes a time in life when you notice a subtle but undeniable shift inside yourself. It doesn't come with fireworks or a loud announcement, but with a quiet clarity that changes everything. For years, maybe you carried wounds you didn't talk about, repeating cycles of pain, ending up in the same kind of relationships, the same kinds of jobs, the same struggles that made you feel powerless. It might have seemed like life was against you, like no matter how much effort you put in, you always landed in the same place. But what was really happening was deeper than circumstances. It was your shadow, as Carl Jung described it, the hidden parts of yourself you hadn't yet faced, calling for your attention through repeated lessons. Perhaps you tolerated disrespect in love because somewhere inside you didn't fully believe you deserved more. Perhaps you stayed in work situations where you were undervalued because you confused sacrifice with worth. Or maybe you silenced your voice, agreeing when you wanted to say no, because deep down, you were afraid of being abandoned if you stood in your truth. These cycles were not punishments, they were teachers. They stayed in your life until you were ready to see the part of you that allowed them to continue. And then one day, something shifts. You look at the same situation that once trapped you, and you realize you're not that person anymore. You say no without shaking. You walk away without guilt. You stop over-explaining yourself to win approval you don't even want. It isn't that you've become harder, it's that you've become whole. Where the wound once was, now there's healing. Where there used to be a hook for pain to latch onto, there's only smooth ground. That is why the same insults don't cut you anymore. The same manipulations don't work, the same patterns don't repeat. It's not suppression. It's freedom. This transformation is not just emotional, it ripples into every area of your life. You begin to notice who stays and who fades away. People who once crossed your boundaries either step up and treat you with respect, or they vanish. New people arrive, souls who meet you at your new level of self-worth. It feels almost like the universe reorganizes itself around the new energy you carry. You don't chase this change, it happens naturally because you've shifted on the inside. To ground this realization, try reflecting on one cycle you've broken. Maybe it was always ending up with partners who withheld love. Maybe it was constantly giving everything at work while receiving nothing in return. Maybe it was battling your own mind, caught in negative self-talk or procrastination. Write down what it looked like before, how it shows up now, and most importantly, what changed within you that made the difference. Was it a moment of courage? A breaking point? Or simply a quiet decision to stop betraying yourself? When you name it, you claim it. You begin to see your own growth clearly, and that awareness strengthens the transformation. But the signs of freedom don't end with healthier boundaries or calmer emotions. Perhaps the deepest sign of all comes in your sense of purpose. When karmic cycles are complete, life itself begins to feel different. The things that once drove you, status as validation, money, approval, no longer carry the same weight. They may still matter, but they no longer define you. Instead, you feel drawn toward what feeds your spirit, even if it makes no sense on paper. Carl Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming your true self beyond masks and expectations. It's not about inventing a purpose but uncovering the one that's been waiting for you all along. The false self, the one that chased recognition, tried to fit in, lived by other people's rules, begins to dissolve. What remains is your authentic self, the one who doesn't measure worth by external standards but by inner truth. This shift may look dramatic from the outside. Someone leaves a high-paying job to pursue art or service. Another abandons the security of a stable life to follow a path that finally feels alive. To others, it may look like recklessness, but inside, it feels like sanity. It's not running away, it's coming home. For others, the shift may be quieter. The things you once dismissed as unproductive, like writing, painting, or gardening, suddenly feel essential. Small joys become sacred. Conversations about depth and meaning feel nourishing, while gossip or surface-level chatter drains you. You begin to choose differently, not out of fear or habit, but from alignment with who you've become. And here lies the deeper truth: the struggles you once thought were punishments were actually stepping stones. Every heartbreak, every rejection, every disappointment was carving you open, forcing you to see what you had hidden. Those cycles weren't endless. They were contracts, lessons that stayed until you were ready to grow through them. And when you did, they dissolved. Now, life is no longer about surviving the same old patterns. It's about creating new ones, from wholeness, not from wounds. From choice, not from compulsion. That is when you know you've broken free. You haven't just changed your life, you've changed yourself. And because of that, the world will never look the same again. There comes a time in your life when you notice a quiet shift within you. Success, recognition, money, things that once seemed like the only measures of achievement, no longer feel as heavy or as meaningful. They don't disappear entirely, but they stop defining who you are. Instead, new questions rise in the silence of your heart. Does this path bring me peace? Does this work add something meaningful to the world? What would I do if no one judged me, if no one expected anything from me? That last question often arrives like a whisper, but it carries the weight of truth. It exposes the difference between living for approval and living from your soul. At first, this realization can feel disorienting. You may look at your life, the routines you've built, the identity you've carried, the goals you once chased, and feel a strange emptiness. What once gave you pride now feels hollow. What once felt urgent now feels irrelevant. It's as though the ground beneath you has shifted, and the old map no longer makes sense. This can be frightening, but it is not a sign of failure. It's the first sign that you're awakening to something deeper. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey of shedding the false layers of self so the authentic one can emerge. And when karmic debts are paid, when the lessons of suffering have been learned, this process becomes unavoidable. The masks fall away. The personas you wore to fit in begin to crumble. You can no longer pretend to be someone you're not. And though it may feel like a death of identity, it is in truth a rebirth of the soul. This threshold is one of the most powerful crossroads a human being can encounter. On one side is the comfort of the familiar, the roles, the habits, the expectations of others. On the other side is the unknown, a path without guarantees, yet filled with a strange sense of rightness. To step forward often feels terrifying, but it also feels inevitable. You begin to realize that staying where you are would cost you more than the risk of change. And then, something almost magical begins to happen. As you start listening to that inner pull, life begins to respond differently. Synchronicities appear, small, mysterious alignments that defy logic. The right book shows up at the exact moment you need its wisdom. A stranger says something in passing that answers a question you've been carrying silently for months. A door you thought was locked suddenly swings open, revealing possibilities you hadn't considered. These are not accidents. They are signs that you are finally walking in rhythm with your deeper truth. It's the universe's way of saying, yes, this is the way. Keep going. Think of the person who has spent years chasing titles, promotions, and wealth, only to feel an aching emptiness despite their success. Then one day, almost without warning, they feel called to something else, teaching, creating, serving, healing. To the outside world, it may look irrational or even reckless to walk away from security. But to them, it feels like breathing for the first time. Or picture the one who abandons a life of chasing approval to write, to paint, to work in quiet service, not because it's easier, but because it's truer. These are not acts of rebellion against society, they are acts of alignment with the soul. And you don't have to leap all at once. Transformation rarely demands everything overnight. You can begin with something small, an hour a day spent doing what lights you up, a single step toward the path that feels authentic, a simple act of courage that breaks the old cycle. What matters is that you begin. Because the soul may whisper gently at first, but over time, it grows louder. And if ignored for too long, it will shake the very foundations of your life to be heard. When you shift from proving yourself to expressing yourself, when your actions are no longer driven by fear but by truth, you know something profound has happened. This is the point at which karmic debt has been cleared. You're no longer tethered to the same old lessons, no longer caught in cycles that kept repeating. You've earned your freedom. You're no longer defined by old wounds, no longer enslaved by validation, no longer bound to the identities others tried to give you. You are free to live as yourself, fully, unapologetically, without disguise. And this freedom doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It comes in quiet shifts. The pain that once ruled you no longer dictates your choices. The triggers that used to send you spiraling now feel like distant echoes. Toxic patterns dissolve because they have served their purpose, and you are no longer the same person who needed them. Instead of chasing outcomes, you find yourself aligning with life's flow. Instead of running from fear, you begin walking toward truth. And your purpose changes. It stops being about survival or proving your worth, and starts being about expression, contribution, and truth. If you find yourself in this space, take a moment to pause and recognize it. This is not small. This is evidence of a soul that has grown, a soul that has learned, a soul that is ready for its next chapter. Healing was never about perfection. It was always about progression, about every small step you've taken to choose authenticity over fear. Every moment of awareness, every decision to listen inward rather than outward, has led you here, and if you're hearing this message, it's not by accident. You are already walking the path of transformation. You're already in conversation with the universe, whether you realize it or not. The signs have been there all along, the question is, are you willing to trust them? Because the truth is, the heaviest debts, once paid, don't vanish into nothing. They transform into wisdom. They become teachers. They become the compass you carry forward, pointing you toward a life that isn't about striving for approval, but about thriving in truth. And when you embrace that, you discover something astonishing. You are not behind, you are not lost, you are not broken. You are exactly where you're meant to be. And the best is not behind you, it's ahead, waiting for you to step fully into it.